Hello, everyone. There's a lot of developments in the Israel-Hamas war in the last several days. This summary is going to focus on the hostage and truce negotiations, Hezbollah's new leadership and ceasefire talks between Israel and Lebanon, ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, and Israel's outlawing of UNRWA. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive deep into the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas war. On day 389 to the war, the first thing I'm going to relate to is the hostage situation. On Sunday, October 27th, a summit meeting was held in Qatar, attended by the head of the Israeli Mossad, Dadi Barnea, the Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani, and CIA Director William Burns. A few days before that, the head of the Israeli Shabak, Ronen Bar, had met with the new Egyptian head of intelligence, Hassan Rashad, also in an attempt to restart negotiations. Rashad, however, was not part of the Qatari meeting, which is somewhat surprising considering the makeup of the previous meetings. There was some rumors surfacing about tensions between Qatar and Egypt with regards to where should the summit take place. Either way, those are rumors. He was not invited to that first meeting. However, according to reports, he will attend future meetings. At that summit meeting, several different proposals were discussed in order to restart negotiations. The first, which was a joint Israeli-Egyptian proposal, according to at least most reports, however, it was actually proposed by Egypt, is a deal that will start with a short-term 48-hour truce, leading to a 10-day ceasefire in which the sides are going to continue negotiations. During this time, there would be the release of between 4 to 5 Israeli hostages in exchange for the release of an undisclosed number of Palestinian prisoners. The second proposal that was discussed was an Israeli proposal that was leaked on October 29th, which focuses on a 30-day truce that will be declared and the release of between 11 to 14 Israeli hostages. Specifically, this would relate to all the female hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip, as well as to the elderly men. According to reports, the Israeli proposal stated that a number of Palestinians would be released, however, that number would be determined in negotiations. Also importantly, there was no mention in the Israeli proposal of an IDF withdrawal or redeployment during that 30-day ceasefire. However, some reports suggested that Hamas would possibly receive quote-unquote guarantees that such a withdrawal will take place in the future in a substitute for any redeployment that would occur during this deal. Alongside these, two more things were reportedly discussed in this summit. One is a channel that has been opened between Hamas and Russia, with Russia advocating a separate deal that would secure the release of 2 hostages that have Russian citizenship that are still in captivity. Little detail was given about what this deal would include. However, one of Hamas's top figures, Musa Abu Marzouk, has traveled to Russia in the last several days in order to discuss this. It was not reported if this is a deal that will be brokered with Israel, or directly between Hamas and Russia, or what this would include. In addition to this, Hamas also stated that it is going to put forth an all-encompassing one-phase deal that will include the release of all Israeli hostages, a complete ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, alongside the release of Palestinian prisoners. Again, Hamas has not proposed that yet. However, the possibility of it proposing it was discussed in that summit. With regards to where things stand right now, it's important to note that Hamas has already publicly rejected the smaller proposals, the Egyptian and Israeli proposals that were put forth. And the Israeli government also already rejected the notion that a deal will include a complete ceasefire and IDF withdrawal. So while these things are being floated, both sides have already, through different channels, said if that is the deal that's on the table, it's going to be rejected. The United States and Qatar are reportedly now going to pressure Hamas in order to accept those guarantees of an Israeli withdrawal after the deal as a way to bring Hamas to accept one of those short-term deals. It remains to be seen if that can actually be developed. The summit meeting itself, it seems, did not make any advances on actually bringing the sides closer together on those points of disagreement. There was no official conclusion that was published from the summit as well. Some describe the summit as less of a negotiation meeting and rather an initial attempt to see if negotiations themselves can resume. Despite this, the participants in the summit did actually extend their stay by an additional day, indicating some possible positivity. It appears the summit is now going to lead to another summit that will be attended by Egypt as well, and it remains to be seen how communication can then be fostered between the sides. Again, right now, this is the first summit that has taken place in over 2 months, so it does indicate some progress. Remains to be seen if that progress can be built on and actually develop a deal between the sides. Shifting attention to the ongoing fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, there are still hundreds of rockets and drones that are being fired by Hezbollah each day into Israel, at scores of IDF attacks throughout Lebanon, and as the military continues its ground invasion into southern Lebanon as well. Very intensive fighting has been reported in several different Lebanese towns and villages throughout the past several days, and substantial airstrikes are also reported in different areas of the country. A specifically noteworthy one occurred in Baalbek on October 28th, reportedly resulting in over 60 people who were killed in that attack. The Lebanese Health Ministry has reported that since the beginning of the war, so that's already since the beginning of October 8th, 2023, 2,792 people have been killed in Lebanon and over 12,772 have been injured. The IDF stated that it estimates that between 1,500 and 2,000 Hezbollah operatives have been killed in the war, the vast majority of them since the IDF invasion began just over a month ago. Meanwhile, there's also two more important developments that occurred in this arena. One is Hezbollah's appointment of Naim Qassem as the official group leader, replacing Hassan Nasrallah. As a reminder, Qassem was Nasrallah's deputy in the organization for the last 30 years and is considered one of the group's chief ideologues, the person who defined the ideology of the group as it was coming together. At the same time, he does not have anywhere near the same public persona that Hassan Nasrallah had, and in addition to that, his involvement in running the group's military activity itself has been quite limited over the years. It remains to be seen in what direction he will take the movement. I will say here, if you're interested in more on this, check out my summary from September 28th, where I discussed the role of Hassan Nasrallah in his assassination and what this might mean for the group. In addition to this, another important development in the last several days is that as the IDF has been stating that it is coming close to concluding its operation in southern Lebanon, there's continuous attempts to initiate some sort of diplomatic resolution between Israel and Lebanon before Israel expands its operation further north. Israel's been negotiating with the United States, and the special envoy of the United States to the region, Amos Hochstein, has been coordinating both with Israel and the Lebanese government over the last several days. According to reports, the sides are coming close to some sort of deal and diplomatic resolution. What is currently being negotiated is a 60-day truce that will occur between Israel and Hezbollah. This will be defined as a transition period in southern Lebanon, during which time the IDF will redeploy in key areas of southern Lebanon, while the Lebanese military takes up positions throughout the southern parts of the country. According to what has been published, the deal will involve three main elements. The first is the full and expanded implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 back from 2006. This relates to a complete pull of Hezbollah north of the Litani River and the full deployment of between 5,000 and 10,000 Lebanese soldiers throughout southern Lebanon in order to ensure that Lebanon has control of this area and Hezbollah does not have any presence south of the Litani River. The second main aspect is establishing an international monitoring and enforcement mechanism of this deal. Israel has insisted that the IDF will have authority to operate in southern Lebanon if Hezbollah does attempt to reestablish itself south of the Litani River, and it is shown that the Lebanese army does not deal with this development. A third aspect of the deal is stopping Hezbollah's rearmament through a system of international monitoring. According to reports, Russia has actually agreed to take a main part in this monitoring system. Direct negotiations have reportedly been developing between Israel and Russia in order to see how this can happen. I remind everyone that Russia has a very extensive presence in Syria, which is one of the main routes of weapon smuggling to Hezbollah. In Lebanon, it has been reported that despite the losses that have been inflicted by the IDF since the invasion of Lebanon, Hezbollah has actually been gaining momentum over the past week due to the heavy casualties that Israel has suffered in Lebanon. According to the reports, Lebanon has urged that the deal move forward quickly, while Hezbollah is still feeling the pressure of Israel, despite the fact that it is currently gaining momentum. In addition to this, I'll also say that it was reported on October 29th in Israel's Channel 11 that Israel has recently added two more demands in the negotiations. The first is having a deployed force that will also be positioned along the Syria-Lebanon border in order to stop any weapons smuggling from Syria to Lebanon. And the second be that Israel will have authority to enforce the deal through military action. According to the report, Israel is seeking explicit written authority from the United States, saying that even though this deal is going to be implemented, Israel will still have authority to carry out military operations in Lebanon. It was not reported which force the country was demanding be deployed along the Lebanese-Syrian border. Presumably, this either relates to Lebanese military or international actors. What was reported is another demand that has now been raised by Israel as the negotiations are moving forward. Shifting attention to the Gaza Strip, there's been intensive fighting that has continued throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip ever since the IDF launched its operation in Jabalia refugee camp and in the surrounding areas. The IDF has continued to expand its operation within Gaza City. Major airstrikes were reported in the region in the past several days. The operation has also included major besieging and raid of the Kamal Adwan hospital in Jabalia refugee camp. The IDF stated that Hamas had taken up positions in the hospital and was using it in order to direct its regional operations. After about a week-long siege that was imposed on the hospital, the IDF did actually enter and raided the hospital, and many arrests were reported. In addition to that, major airstrikes were also reported in the last several hours in the areas of Beit Lahia. At this point, the Palestinian Communications Ministry is saying that over 80 people were killed in those airstrikes. However, I remind everyone the Palestinian Communications Ministry has been shown in the past to be very inaccurate in its reports. It is not to be confused with the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, which is considered far more accurate. In addition to this, in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, it was reported on October 25th that the IDF launched a surprise raid into Khan Yunis. The IDF has not been operating in Khan Yunis already for several months. According to reports, major airstrikes were initiated, followed by pouring in of armored units into the eastern Al Nahara neighborhood. At least 38 people were reported killed in the initial airstrikes. Sporadic battles have been reported in that area since that initial invasion. However, there's no specific reports if the IDF is actually expanding that operation in Khan Yunis, or if this is still remnants of an initial airstrike and invasion that occurred, and possibly the IDF is pulling out. Finally, one other development that I'm going to add relates to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and more broadly in the Israeli-Palestinian arena. As I stated in several reports recently, the situation in northern Gaza Strip worsened quite dramatically in the latter part of September and throughout October, primarily as a result of the fighting that resumed in northern parts of the Gaza Strip and the collapse of cooperation between the IDF and the private entities that had been contracted to deliver aid in the Gaza Strip, following the continued breakdown of cooperation between Israel and UNRWA. So the IDF had been working with private entities in the Gaza Strip to try to replace UNRWA in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. However, that cooperation with the private entities also eventually collapsed. On October 28th, a further step was taken in the breakdown of the relationship between Israel and UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, the main agency that is responsible for supplying aid to Palestinians. The Israeli parliament, the Knesset, passed two laws, one outlawing UNRWA's activity within Israel, and the other, possibly more important one, forbidding contact between Israeli officials and UNRWA. Now, it's important to note that the laws are only going to come into effect in 90 days from now, i.e. there are still 3 months until the process is to be completed. However, Israel is supposed to inform the United Nations within 1 week of its intentions to back out of its agreements between Israel and UNRWA. If these laws are in fact implemented, they are likely to have a variety of impacts on the Israeli-Palestinian arena. I'm going to mention what is possibly the top 3 impacts. However, again, the ricochets might be much further than that. First, as a result of the law forbidding UNRWA's activity within Israel, there will be a direct impact on East Jerusalem. Unlike the rest of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem has been officially annexed by Israel, and thus, according to Israeli law, it is part of the country. Thus, the law that forbids UNRWA from operating within Israel is going to apply to East Jerusalem, and UNRWA will be forced to close down its activities in areas such as Shuafat and Shuafat refugee camp, where the agency's activities include educational establishments, sanitation, other welfare operations. These will all be closed down in other areas of East Jerusalem as well. In addition, there will likely be further impacts within the West Bank in areas where the connection between UNRWA activity within Israel and in the West Bank is essential. However, East Jerusalem will feel the brunt of this as the agency's activities will be required to close down. Second, UNRWA is likely to suffer substantial logistical difficulties as a result of this, since much of its banking operations, including paying salaries to its employees, runs through the Israeli banking system. The law itself does not specifically outlaw UNRWA's money transfers through Israeli banks. However, bank accounts that are affiliated with UNRWA specifically may end up being challenged. Remains to be seen how the law is actually interpreted when it comes to Israeli banks. Third, and possibly most important with regards to the Israel-Hamas war, is the second law that forbids any communication between Israeli officials and UNRWA. If this law is implemented, it will have a devastating impact on the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The law will require the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli military, to have no more contact or coordination with UNRWA, which would be a death blow to much of the current humanitarian effort in the Gaza Strip. So just, again, to situate things in proportion, whenever in the Gaza Strip there is some sort of UN activity, it inevitably is facilitated by UNRWA. This includes things like medical establishments that are run in cooperation with the United Nations. This includes coordinating food distribution zones, the different areas through which humanitarian trucks come in. All this is part of the coordination between the IDF and UNRWA. If the IDF is in fact forbidden from having contact with UNRWA, it is going to be a death blow to the way these mechanisms are in fact run. There has been a lot of criticism that was raised of Israel's move, specifically in light of the fact that Israel has not actually sought to find a mechanism that will replace UNRWA, while the cooperation with UNRWA is gradually being outlawed. In a moment of analysis, I will add that this endeavor may be linked to an instruction that was given by Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu to the IDF several weeks ago, wherein, despite fierce objections from the Israeli military and the Israeli Shabak, the Prime Minister instructed the IDF to begin preparations for assuming full responsibility for distributing all humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip directly without any other mediators. It is possible, therefore, that this is the plan that Israel is hoping to develop, to have direct distribution of the IDF of the humanitarian aid rather than working through UNRWA. However, at that point, it is speculation on my part. What is for sure is that if this law is implemented without an alternative, it will lead to devastating consequences in the humanitarian arena in the Gaza Strip, which I will say will likely also have severe repercussions for Israel as well. Those are my highlights from the past several days in the Israel-Hamas war. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, send them on to anyone who you think might be interested. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.